All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of After the Pause. Kristy, thank you for being here today.
Oh, wait, thank you for having me.
Of course. Friends, we are so excited that you're here with us. It's been so fun to get to record these with each other and then with other guests that we've had on here. But After the Pause really came from our book, a place called Braverly. There it is, Kristy. Yes. This book, it actually launched last summer, which is so exciting and also crazy to think that it's been nearly a year of this book being in the world. But it's a book all about courage. How do we live with courage, dream boldly, and influence courage in others because of who God is and because of who he says we are? And so on this podcast, we just want to talk about that. What does it look like in our everyday life to choose courage, to choose boldness? What does it look like to confront fear? And what does it look like to confront those insecurities and the lies that we believe? And so today, we're going to be talking about something that is a little bit different. It's still on the idea of courage and still on the idea of fear. But it's something that I'm going to be honest, Kristy, when you brought up this idea of like, we're going to talk about this, I was like, why? No, let's not. But which is ironic because we're going to be talking about today is this idea of saying no and the courage that we can find when we say no. I think I didn't want to talk about it because I'm not very good at it. I was like, cool. I literally was like, Kristy, you go ahead and lead it because Lord
Which
knows
is,
I'm bad at it.
it's also hilarious because I am not great at it either, but it's one of those, I think more and more in my life, like I realize there is a need to at least talk about it because I think so often it's the thing that we don't talk about and we push ourselves closer and closer to burnout because we're not willing to talk about like it being okay to say no, or how do you say no, or is it even courageous to say no? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I guess like what courage do we find in saying no? Like what is there in that idea of saying no that's actually really courageous?
Yeah. I think honestly, like if I could pinpoint it down to just like one main thought today, I would say the courage in saying no is like if we don't say no, then our no, like our not saying no to this thing means that we are putting our no somewhere, right? And
Mm,
so our yes, because right, if we're not saying no, we're saying yes. Our yes means that we're saying no to something else. And have we stopped to think about really what that means? And so I think that there's courage in the no, courage in the no so that we can say yes to the things that God is asking us to say yes to, because he's not asking us to say yes to everything.
right.
But we get caught in that space a lot where we feel like, I don't know, maybe he is. This is a need too, you know?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think that it's so true that there is a lot of fear like at the root of no or the fear of like saying no, like at
Yeah.
least for me in my life, like where I said like, Kristy, you go ahead and lead it because I'm not very good at this. Like at the end of
Mhm.
the day, I'm not very good at saying no because I think there's a lot of fear that I feel when when I have that opportunity or I know that I need to say no to a person, an
Mhm.
opportunity, whatever it is. There
Yeah.
is a lot of fear, and for me, I am a classic people pleaser.
Mhm.
It's just very real for me. And I think for me, like the fear is like, I just don't want to disappoint somebody.
Mhm.
Or if I feel that fear of saying no in ministry, it's like, I don't want to disappoint somebody. I also want to like prove that I am like classic. I want to prove something. I want to prove that I'm capable to like do what my boss is asking of me, um, or if a family is like they have a need and they call me or call someone else on the team, I just have this desire and this need to like one show up for them, but I think more than that, I have this desire to like prove that like I can do it. Like I can drop what I'm doing right now and come help you with this random thing, random form that you need filled out or this random whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of fear inside of this idea of like I don't want to say no. I think the root of it for me is a lot of fear. And I think that's why I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, but I think that's so true for everybody. Like, I would say the root of why I don't say no to things is also fear-based, right? Like, for the same reasons. I don't want to disappoint someone. Maybe it's even like, I don't want to miss out, like
FOMO.
if I say no to that, what am I going to be missing, and like someone else gets to be a part of it and I want to be a part of it, and that's super selfish. So like for me, one of the things I've really had to put into practice, and I'm not great at it, but when I'm asked to do something, asked to like say yes to a certain thing, I think one of the first questions I'll ask myself is, one, do you feel like you need to say yes?
Mm,
Or why do you think you can't say no? Like if you feel like you should say no, but are afraid to, like, why do you feel like you can't say no?
yeah.
And to really like let myself sit in that space. And it's amazing. This doesn't happen every time. So I'm not saying this is like foolproof, happens every time. But when I allow myself to pause and ask those questions first before giving an answer, oftentimes whoever's asking something of me, by the time I'm actually ready to get back to them, has already figured out something else.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so there's something to be said for that pause of like, because I feel like the Lord, he speaks to us, right? And like he will make clear things that he's asking us to step into and asking us to stay out of. But it takes that kind of close connection with him to like really know his voice and know what he's saying and know what he asks of us. And again, it doesn't happen like that every time, but I
Mm.
have found that like if I'm willing to stop and like ask myself those questions and really consider for a second, what will my yes or my no mean? Sometimes the thing works itself out before I've ever even given an answer.
Yeah, totally. No, I totally get that. And then there's moments of like, okay, I didn't need to like drop everything for that or
Mhm.
whatever it was. Like I think so much of this comes down to the posture of our heart then and what is motivating our yes. I think for me then so my world is ministry and it's writing and all of that. And so I think what I've found for myself when I say yes to something when maybe I should have said no, um what's motivating that yes then is guilt.
Mhm.
And this feeling of like I think I've spent a lot of my time just like pure vulnerability here. I think I've spent a lot of my time in Chicago, like almost like fighting that guilt of like, like I should go do this or I should do this or whatever it is. I should say yes to this. And that is not what should be motivating
Mhm.
anything,
Yeah.
particularly ministry. But I think that that's what we can fall into and other just heart postures and mentalities. That's been a big one
Mhm.
for me is just like, okay, if I say yes when I should be saying no, I'm really just like I'm not being filled with the love of Jesus and
Mhm.
like just this sense of like this is what he's called me to. I'm more sense filled with a sense of should and then guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guilt is like, it's a real thing. It's
Mhm.
such a real thing. And as people, right, who work in ministry, I feel like sometimes we take on this guilt too. Like we feel like it's being projected on us from others that isn't always true. Right. But like we assume that if I'm not willing to do this, like I look like I'm not a team player. I
Yep.
look like it's not a case for laziness, right? Like we're not saying like say no to everything and do
Yeah.
nothing. But there is something to be said for it's okay to say no. And I think that's not always the mindset of ministry,
Mhm.
which is really unfortunate. And I'm guilty of that just as much as anyone else. And for me too, I think another one, especially being in ministry and having spent so much time in it, like true peeling back the layers and vulnerable moment for me. I mean, I spent over 12 years in church ministry.
Mm.
And over that time, like you kind of get in these rhythms and like, this is what it takes and this is what I do. And slowly but surely you can start to set yourself in this position of like, I'm irreplaceable, right? Like
Mhm.
this doesn't happen without me. And so like, I've got to be the one to do it. And it almost becomes like this savior mentality. And oh gosh, to like actually say it out loud, like I hate that, but like I've seen it in myself, right?
Mhm.
And it's so true, like stepping onto a foreign mission field, like you come in and it can be so easy to be like, okay, what are the issues? And I'm gonna fight for justice and let me at it, and like that's not the place that we're called to stand. And I think it's been such a learning process over all these years in ministry of how to come out of that place, right? Because I've done it wrong plenty of times. And I can admit that I've done it wrong plenty of times. And so trying to like heal those things back and like, okay, I know what happens to me internally when I set myself into these places and I end up carrying weight on my shoulders that I was never intended to carry. I get pushed toward burnout and like I'm not at my best and so nobody's getting the best out of me because I'm just taking on the world and that's not what the Lord has called me to do. And so I know the ugly side of it enough now that I'm willing to fight for a better place, like standing in the place that the Lord actually asked me to stand, because I know what happens when I overstep.
Yeah, totally. I think sorry, go ahead. I think that savior mentality is it's rough because I'm also like,
Mhm.
yep, I like recognize it in my own heart, my own life. But I think that it also, I mean, ministry gets a bad rap and missions gets a
Mhm.
bad rap for that.
Yeah.
Rightly so. We've certainly had plenty in our history that's like, yeah, there's a reason why like
Mhm.
ministry of missions has that idea of like the savior mentality. But I think too that savior mentality can bleed into so many areas of life, like
Yeah.
whether you're a mom, whether you work at just a regular 9 to 5 job, that idea of
Mhm.
like I'm irreplaceable.
Mhm.
Okay, like if you're a mom, okay, I'm gonna be honest, you're probably irreplaceable, but like you're not the savior of your family or your kids,
Yeah.
you know. Um, you should not be replaced. Um, be really clear about that. But I mean, just other jobs like that. I think that it is so much bigger than ministry and missions. And it's so sneaky.
Mhm.
I think it disguises itself a lot and it really just kind of takes up space in our mind kind of rent free and we don't even recognize it until like maybe a moment where you're like, oh wait, that was ugly and I didn't like the way my heart was in that moment. um
Mhm.
I think I've certainly like battled that in my own life and certainly served on teams where we have to battle that. We're like, okay, we're not the savior here, like
Mhm.
we need to show up for sure, but at the end of the day, like we're just humans and
Mhm.
we can't come in and like save the world here. There needs to be a no at some point.
Yeah. Right. Because yeah, wherever when there's not a no, something else is getting it. Right.
Yeah.
It's so talk about like fresh on my mind. I just had a conversation with a friend today. We're both here in ministry, right? And like we work for different organizations. We're doing very different things and some similar things. But it's been a season where we've all kind of been running around like crazy. And there's the reality of there's a war going on across the
Mhm.
border where I live. And we've had in this past week alone, thousands of refugees coming across and fleeing these war zones. And so there's incredible need around us,
Yeah.
incredible need. And so many people are like stepping up to the plate and working together. And it's been really beautiful. But our conversation today, like we were just talking about the different things going on this week and like, our bodies, our minds, they're just tired, and
Mhm.
trying to find ways to like care for ourselves in the midst of caring for others. And she made the comment of like, but can you actually say no to the orphans? And like, that is a hard question. Like, I had to pause and I felt so icky saying it, but I was like, yes, yes, you can say no to the orphans. But like, as the conversation continued, just talking about like, a conversation that she had with her daughter then earlier that day was her daughter had mentioned like, mommy, you have time for all these other kids,
Mhm.
but then you come home and you're so tired and we don't have any time together. And it's just re-emphasizing, right, that thing of like our yes to this thing over here means we're saying no to something else. And
Yep.
sometimes you have to say no to that, and I understand, but not every time,
Yep.
right? And so there's this balance to be found, and I'm not saying it's easy, and we certainly don't always get it right, but there is a balance to be found in that. But if we're completely unwilling to say no, we'll never find that balance.
Exactly. Exactly. I think there's such a tension in this idea of saying yes, when to say yes and when to say no. And there's never a cut and dry answer. Well, okay. There is a world in which there is a cut and dry answer. You should say no to robbing a bank. Obviously. But I think in normal life, it's really not as cut and dry and it's really not
Mhm.
as yeah, black and white. And there's such a tension that we have to navigate. I certainly remember it was in a book that I read when I realized like that phrase of like my yes means I'm saying no to something else. So if I'm going to keep saying
Mhm.
yes to this thing, I'm saying no to something that I may not realize I'm saying no to. And is
Mhm.
that thing actually more important than this other thing that I'm like too afraid to say no to? Like in
Mhm.
like at least like to its face or very like outwardly, like this is what I'm saying no to, you know? I think
Yeah.
I still remember that moment when I realized like, oh yeah, my yes means I'm saying no to something else. Vice versa,
Mhm.
my no means that I'm saying yes to something else. It's not that something is dying or that something is just cut off. It means that
Mhm.
something else has the chance to kind of take center stage. Um, and there's moments, right? There is certainly moments in life and in ministry where um, we say yes again and again and again because the needs are so great. But then there does need to be a moment where we say no because we are not
Mhm.
God. And
Yeah.
we can't constantly say yes. And it's the same for all of us, no matter what we do. Um, yeah, no matter what's happening in our lives, like yes, show up, say yes to things, but there is a moment where you have to say no. And that no is so courageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will take every ounce of courage that you have
Yeah.
to say it. But yeah, it's okay to safeguard the dreams and the visions that the Lord has given you, right? It's
Mhm.
okay to protect those and to be able to continue to give those your yes means you're going to have to say no to other places. It's not selfish. I don't think it's wrong to do that. Like the Lord gives us those things to carry and he makes clear the things that we're called to carry. And so it's courageous to say no so that
Yep.
you can say yes, right? It's courageous to leave space for somebody else to say the yes
Mm.
that like you've been asked to say, but I don't know if that's my yes, right? Like, so it's courageous to say no to that so that someone else has the opportunity to step into the place that the Lord is maybe asking them to step. If you're always the first one stepping in, you're taking away someone's spot, right? Like,
Totally.
think of it through that lens. And so, all of those things, like, it makes our no so courageous. We just have to flip the script sometimes of how we think of that word. Like, it's not a negative thing. Yes, you're missing out on something, but you're gaining something.
Yeah.
And so consider that the
Yeah.
next time you're faced with the opportunity to say a yes or a no to something.
Yeah. Christy, what kind of practices do you have in your life? Sometimes they're really helpful and you get it right, and sometimes you don't. But like, what are those practices that you have for saying no?
Yeah. I mean, again, pausing long enough to ask myself the questions of like, what is the root of my yes or my no right now? Like, what is leading that? Um, Talking it out with others sometimes helps, like having my safe people that I can just process with for a second. Um, because a lot of times people can see it from a space that I don't see it from, or people are willing to call out in me, like, hey, I feel like what I've heard you saying is like, you feel the need to say yes because you just don't want to let this person down, or you feel the need to say yes because you just want to be a part of it. And that's not bad, but are you supposed to be, And so being close enough, having people close enough to me to call that out, I think has been really important. Um, and this may sound silly, but, like, I practice saying no in the little things, um, like anything, saying no takes practice, and again, I'm not great at it, and so it can be silly things like, "Hey, do you wanna hang out tonight?" "No."
No.
Like, and it doesn't mean say no every time, but, like, trying to give myself permission to just learn how to say no.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's okay, and so I do, as silly as it may sound to say that I practice that, like, I do. I practice saying no, even in small things, so that my mind knows, like, you have permission to say this. You don't need to say it every time, but you have permission to.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I
What
think
about for yourself?
yeah, I think that's so good. I think that for me, it would look similar to yours as far as like pausing and just taking a minute if possible. But the questions or the thoughts that I kind of ponder is like, what is motivating? If I say yes right now, what is motivating that yes? Um,
Mhm.
is it is it just this fear of like I should, or this idea that I should, or this like guilt that's motivating it? Is it something that I'm like, you know what, I do think this is what the Lord is asking me to do, even though it feels like I should say no. Maybe this is actually like something that I should step into, and I should walk in this. So I try to ask myself like, what's motivating my yes?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that shows a lot about where my heart is at,
Mm-hmm.
and where, yeah, just the posture of it, like what's motivating it. I think that's a really, really big one for me. And I think the thing that I'm trying to get better at is just having my boundaries clear ahead of time.
Yeah.
Um, Allowing those to kind of flex in different seasons, but having them clear in my own mind, in my own heart, before the opportunity to say yes or no even comes up. I
Mm-hmm.
think that I'm a lot better at that. Oh, not a lot better. I'm better at it, now that I've gotten married, because it's not just me and my own schedule and my own heart and my own mind. But now I have to think of somebody else who's like, hey, are you going to be home ever? And will
Mm-hmm.
you get home before 9? um, and like, so I think I've gotten a little better at that since I've gotten married, because it's just forced me to think about somebody other than myself, and the boundaries maybe that I need, but maybe aren't super healthy. So I think that's another thing where I just try to think about what are the boundaries that I need in this season, and get clear on that beforehand, allow them to
Mm-hmm.
change and maybe be pushed, and challenged a little bit, but not to the point where they like completely fall apart. So I think that's another big thing, that I try to put into practice. Again,
Yeah.
not always great at it.
That's so good though. I mean, truly. I mean, think of it from the standpoint of like a parent with kids, right? Like
Mhm.
you establish the boundaries, you make them clear to others, and then you know that people are going to push those boundaries. And so you have to safeguard them and decide like when those boundaries can move and when like, nope, I've got to continue to just stand firm with this boundary. That's a
Yep.
really good one.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like I've been in spaces and work in ministry, where like if somebody on the team takes a vacation, they're like, hey, don't worry though, I'm still accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I am letting my team know, or like in the past when I was on this team, if I was going away, even if it was for a short time, I would say like, hey, I'm out and I'm inaccessible. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's that idea where I'm like, I'm going to communicate this ahead of time,
Yep.
and it's like goes against what everyone else does, but like I'm inaccessible. Please do
Yeah.
not, unless it is an emergency, do not try to contact me.
And
I think
also, if
that
it's an emergency, here's who you can
yeah,
contact because I'm
exactly.
not available.
Exactly. I think that's actually really common on like
Mhm.
corporate teams, ministry teams, where like, I mean, we have email on our phones. This is a whole other conversation about boundaries,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where I'm like, communicate it ahead of time,
Yeah.
and let your no stand.
Mhm.
Also, another practice that I've tried to do, um, if I am saying no, that's an unpopular no, I sometimes don't give a reason. I just
Mhm.
say, no, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't. Or
Yep.
no, I can't. Or like, maybe I don't even apologize, but I can't do that. Or I'm unavailable. And that's it. Because
Yep.
people don't always need to know your reasons.
Mhm.
And I think for people that struggle with saying no, that's actually a really healthy thing. We're just like, nope.
Yep.
And that's it.
I love it. I think there's been so much good advice, right? That we're still struggling through and trying to
Yes.
take for ourselves. But I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful to say no. Friends, if you have not said no once today and you are ending your day, go ahead and just go say no to somebody just because your mind probably needs to know that you're allowed to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah, it's courageous to do that. And so I hope that as you guys listen, like I hope that there was something in this. I know we went back and forth a lot, but something in this that you can grab a hold of. Know that like we're certainly in your corner. We're on this
Mhm.
journey together, trying to figure it out. We are not two people that are perfect at it, but that are constantly trying to learn how to put these things into practice with the Lord. So one of the things we've been doing to end out our time is to end with a quote from the book. And this one, it may seem a little off, but I just love it for like a very specific part. So I'll read it and then just tell you why I like it. It comes from, this is how our book started in the intro, page 1, second paragraph down. And it simply says this: Kayla, who's the director of Braverly, is the first to assure you she's not the hero of this story. She doesn't hold a fancy degree or years of business experience. Her expertise, however small it may be, comes from years of trial and error. She's not the savior or the solution. Instead, her beautiful relationship with Jesus sets her apart. Her love from him and for him overflows onto those around her. And I love those sentences in there, those 2 sentences of she's not the savior or the solution. That's the same for us. We are not the savior. We are not the solution. And let it be our relationship with Jesus that sets us apart. Our no's and our yeses are inspired by our relationship with the Lord and the posture of our heart that we've taken with him. And so may that be true of us and how we learn to live our lives, that it's out of the overflow of just being so connected to him that we safeguard our steps and we know this is where I need to put my yes. And that means this is where I need to put my no. So I hope you can grab a hold of that truth today, or as you end your day, whatever that looks like for you. If you have not gotten a chance to check out this book or to get your copy of it, you can check out our website, a place called braverly.com. You can get the book there. You can get it anywhere books are sold online. There's also a free ebook version on our website, and we love to give free things, so that's a great place to go. And there's also a free small group guide on there. You don't have to have it to go through the book. It's just an added tool, but it can take you a little deeper into the content and allow you to do this with friends, with your small group, with your church, with whomever it is, because we desire to be this to be something that we do in community. So thank you for tuning in with us. Kate, thanks so much for being so honest and vulnerable with what you shared tonight. And friends, we will see you next time.